Alright guys, what's going on? So here we are today. We're going to be doing the F-18 Hornet countermeasures tutorial. The way I'm going to break this video down is I will show you the countermeasure system and how to set all that up. And then once we've discussed that, you know how to do that, we'll discuss some theory for anyone who's interested in terms of flares and chaffs and how to use what for what reason and how to set up programs for different situations like a BVR fight versus radar guided missiles, scenarios against sidewinders or short range IR homing missiles, what countermeasures to use for those, and also what countermeasures to use during a bombing run, which maybe you didn't think you needed to use countermeasures during a bombing run, but we'll discuss about the reasons behind why you would need to use them if you want to do it correctly. Okay guys, so let's get started. Alright guys, so this is the F-18 Hornet countermeasures flowchart. Okay, I'm going to go through this real quick because it's not going to make a whole lot of sense to you unless you've seen the switches and all that stuff, but I think it's good to review it once before and once after. Okay, so here we go. First thing we're going to do is the dispenser switch. I will obviously show you where this is. You get 2 positions out of that. You technically get 3 with the off position, but that obviously doesn't matter. So you get the on and you get the bypass position. Okay. If you go down the bypass route, you then have the dispenser forward and the dispenser aft buttons. This is the aft button is default D as in Delta, and dispense forward is E as in Echo. So when you hit the dispense forward button in the bypass position, the plane will drop chaff. If you hit dispense aft in the bypass position, the plane will drop flares. And that is the bypass pathway. Okay, you can never change how this plays out. This will always be like this if you have the dispenser switch in the bypass position. When you have the dispenser switch in the on position, again you get dispense forward and dispense aft, but if you press dispense aft, you get to execute a custom program which we will set up, and I will show you how to do that. And if you press dispense forward, the plane will always execute program 5. There is no way to change the fact that it executes program 5. However, you can customize program 5 to your liking. Okay, so let's go talk about all this stuff, and then we'll review this again at the end, and this will make a whole lot of sense. Okay, so you had to look at that flow chart. Hopefully this is all making a little bit of sense to you. It'll make more sense as we go through it now. Okay, so let's just get started. First thing I'm going to do is get rid of my pilot by pressing Shift P, and then I will get rid of my joystick by pressing backspace so we can see everything. Alright, so first thing we're going to look at is right down here. You get the dispenser switch. Okay, so this has 3 positions, right? It's got the off position at the bottom, the on position, and the bypass position. So we're going to talk about the on position first. Okay. Once we have that set up, we're going to come over to our left DDI. And the first thing we're going to note is that the master arm switch is in the arm position. If it's in safe, this won't work. Okay, so we're going to put it in the arm position. Then we're going to press the menu button down here, which brings us to the main menu. I will then press EW for electronic warfare, and it'll bring us to this screen. You can see up here the ALE47. This is the countermeasure system of the F-18. It's basically the program inside the F-18 that controls the countermeasures. Okay, you can see that it's currently in standby. I can change that by pressing mode down here, manual 1, semi-automatic, automatic, and standby. So let's talk about semi-automatic. Semi-automatic is the plane will detect the threat. It will then decide what kind of countermeasure is suitable for that threat, but it will wait for you to hit the dispenser switch to launch the countermeasures. Okay. The next mode, which is automatic, the plane will detect the threat. The plane will decide excuse me, what kind of countermeasure is suitable, and the plane will no longer wait for you to hit the dispenser switch. It will do it itself. Okay, now be careful with how you use this one because it is massively wasteful on your countermeasures. In a situation where 1 or 2 countermeasures would do the trick, this one will drop like 10. Okay, so it's going to burn through your countermeasures real quick. I personally don't ever use it. So, okay, so And then we're going to hit mode back here. We're going to go back to standby and back to manual 1. Okay, now I want to change manual 1. I want to customize my program. What I'm going to do is click ALE47 up here, and that's going to bring up these little numbers here. This is chaff and flare. This is how many I have. This stuff we don't have yet due to early access, so just forget about this. So we're in manual 1. I want to change program manual 1. I'm going to hit ARM up here. And this brings me to the setup of program 1. I can change from program 1 to program 2, 3, 4, 5 down here with step. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 back to 1. Okay. Now I want to set this up, so I'm going to click this chaff button up here, and then I'm going to be able to change the amount of chaff I have using these arrows here. So I can go down to 0, I can go up to 1, 2, 3, right up to 40, I think, because that's how many I have. Oh, you can go to 100. So yeah, I'm going to put it to 0. All right, then I'm going to press flare, okay, and I'm going to increase the flare. I'm going to say 5. These OTH1, OTH2, these are dispensable decoys that we don't currently have yet in early access, so just forget about these for now. But when we do have them, you can set them up just like the flares, right? So you can just decide how many you want. Then we're going to come down here, we're going to set the repeat. So how many times do I want this program to repeat? I want it to repeat, let's say twice. Okay, and this is the interval at which I want it to drop my 5 flares. So I'm going to leave it at 1. But if you wanted to change it, you can come down here to interval, you click this, and you can change it with these buttons here. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at 1 second. Then, once I have this set up, I have to remember to press the save button. Okay, if you don't press the save button, nothing works. It won't save what you just set up. When you press the switch, it'll run the old program before you made the changes. Okay, so you can see this program, this is how it will execute. When I press dispenser switch aft, it will drop 5 flares, and then it will wait 1 second, and it will drop 5 more, and then this program will end because we told it to run twice. Okay. For the sake of simplicity, guys, from now on, when I talk about dispenser switch forward and aft, I'm just going to call it forward and aft. Okay. The default keys for dispenser switch aft is D as in Delta, and for forward it's E as in Echo. Okay. So we have program 1. So let's say I like this. I'm going to then hit the return button down here, up here. I'm going to hit return, and you can see that the ALE47 countermeasure system is set to run manual program 1. So when I hit the aft button, it will run 1. If I hit the forward button, it will always run program 5. Okay, let's go look at program 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is program 5. You can never change the fact that it runs program 5 when you press the forward button, but you can customize program 5 to do whatever you want. Okay, so you can, and I personally like to have no flares for program 5 and have my chaffs set to like 3. Okay, or 1, whatever you want, and then you repeat at an interval of 1, you hit save. This is now program 5. So you can customize program 5, but you can never change the fact that when your dispenser switch is in the on position, you're running the ALE47 countermeasure system. Anytime you press the forward dispenser, it will always drop program 5. Okay? Now let's return and let's have a look at this. You can see that right now I have my ALE47 set to manual 5. So that means that right now, because I have it set to manual 5, if I press either the forward or the back button, or the aft button, sorry, it will always run manual 5. So why would I have this? Okay, this is not a correct setup. You're always going to run program 5 by pressing the forward button anyway. So make sure you always have this one set to something other than program 5. Okay, I'm going to change it to, let's say, 1. I'm going to save that. Now look, we have 40 flares. Okay, so what we're going to do is now we're going to exit the plane. I'm going to show you it running program 1, which was 5 flares repeated twice at an interval of 1 second. Okay, and when we come back, instead of 40 flares, we should have 30 flares. Okay, so let's go have a look at that. Okay, so we have 30 flares. Once again, that was the aft position of the dispenser switch that ran manual program 1. Okay, so that basically sums up everything I wanted to talk about with regarding the ALE47 countermeasure system. The one other thing I think we should talk about is this ECM jettison button down here. So what this is basically, let's say you're performing an emergency landing. For any who don't know, the flares of the F-18 and basically any other plane are just really hot burning pieces of magnesium, okay, that are ignited on fire as they're dropped. So that's why you see the burning and the smoke and all that, right? So let's say you're performing an emergency landing, you don't want to risk one of those catching on fire inside the plane, right? So in order to get rid of those fire hazards, you're going to jettison all of your flares by pressing this button, okay? Once I press this button, all of my flares will be ejected out of the plane, and I will have 0 flares left, and I can do an emergency landing, okay? So I guess I'll just press this now, we can see what it looks like. Okay, and then I have to press it again to turn it off. And then let's come up here and look at my flares. So there's 0 flares left. Okay. Now, let's talk about the dispenser in the bypass position. Okay. Basically, when I have it in the bypass position, guys, my ALE47 program does not work. Okay, so look up here. ALE47 is crossed out. Okay. So the plane in the bypass position no longer cares about how you set up your programs in the ALE47 countermeasure system. Okay, it will bypass that program, hence bypass. Okay, and what it will do is whenever you press the aft dispenser switch, it will drop 1 flare. The forward dispenser switch will drop 1 chaff. Okay, and that's the way it will always be. You can't change that. Aft is flare, forward is chaff. Okay, and if for whatever reason you don't like that, you want to customize that, you're going to have to go down to the on position and go customize your ALE47. Okay, so that basically sums up the countermeasure system in terms of flares and chaffs. So for anyone who's interested, the next section I'll do a little theory about when to use what program, like how to set up a program for a certain situation. Maybe for a BVR fight, we can do a setup for a dogfight, or we can do a setup for a bombing run, which you wouldn't think you need countermeasures, but you do. All right, if you want to do it properly. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, stick around. We'll talk about that next. Okay, so you saw everything. You saw all the modes and all that stuff. So maybe this will make a little bit more sense to you now that you've seen all the stuff. So once again, just to review it for anyone who's still a little confused, it goes dispenser switch. That was the switch behind the joystick, as you remember. And in the bypass position, dispense forward will drop chaff. Okay, and in the bypass position, dispense aft will drop flares. There is no way to change this. Okay, whenever you're in the bypass position, this is always how the plane will execute the countermeasure program. Okay, in the dispenser switch on position, the dispense forward will always execute program 5. There is no way to change the fact that it will execute program 5. However, you can customize program 5 as we talked about. And in the dispenser switch in the on position, dispenser aft will execute a custom program, whatever you have designated that program to be. Okay, that's either program 1 through 4. As we talked about, you don't want to have 5 set up for the execute custom program, or alternatively, the semi-automatic and automatic modes if you are choosing to use one of those. Okay, dispense aft will get you there. All right, so I hope this has clarified the countermeasures of the F-18 Hornet for you. And now we can move on to the theory section. All right, guys. So we're back here. We're going to talk a little bit about different missiles and countermeasures. Okay. So I'm in the bypass position, I'm in the on position, master arm is on, I'm going to hit the menu button, I'm going to go to electronic warfare, ALE47, I'm going to change it from standby to manual 1, and then I'm going to enter the customization screen. Okay, so let's talk about missiles. Okay, so you have basically two kinds of guidance on these missiles. You have the first type, which is radar guided, okay, and the second type, which is called IR homing. Now, IR homing is basically what a Sidewinder is. It's tracking a heat signature, okay? It's locking onto the engines on your plane, which are your heat source, and it is trying to hit that, okay? The way to counter that, obviously, is to drop other heat sources, which is flares. Burning hot pieces of magnesium that will confuse the missile, and hopefully it will go for one of those instead of your engines, okay? So that's what we would use flares for. Now, the one thing to note about IR homing missiles is the fact that your plane will never know that one of those was fired at you, okay? Those are short-range missiles, which means you're probably in a dogfight with the guy, and you got to be looking back at him at all times during a dogfight in order to see if he's fired an IR homing missile at you, okay? Your plane will not warn you about an IR homing missile, okay? So once you see that streak come off his plane, you know he fired one at you, you want to drop flares to confuse that missile, okay? Radar guidance missiles are basically like an AIM-7, okay, and AMRAAMs, things like that. Or the Russian R-24, I believe, is also a radar guidance missile, okay? So for these ones, the missile is using a radar system, guidance system, to try to hit you, which means it's scanning the profile of your plane with a radar beam, okay? In order to confuse that missile, it doesn't care about a heat signature, so dropping flares wouldn't do anything. What you need to do is drop chaff, and chaff is basically strips of aluminum that come out of the back of your plane that reflect the radar, the radar beam back to the missile or the plane that's guiding it. So what that'll do is confuse the radar system, okay, by dropping these pieces of aluminum. So, and the radar guidance missiles, your plane will emit a tone saying that you have been locked on and that a missile has been fired. That's when you hear all that beeping going on, right? So once you have that indicator, you know a radar guided missile has been fired at you, you want to drop chaff, not flare. Okay, so it's important to know what kind of missile has been fired at you so you know what kind of countermeasure to drop. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about setting our countermeasure system up for a scenario like that. So I like to do program 1 set up for a dogfight with IR homing or sidewinders. Okay, so if I'm fighting a plane with sidewinders, I don't need my chaff. So I like to put that to 0. Okay, when it comes to the flares, I like to leave it at 1, but you can do 2. And the reason you would do 2 is because you're dropping 2 flares. That's a bigger heat signature, has a higher probability of making that missile go stupid. Okay, so if you can make that missile go stupid with 2 flares, that's great. If you can do it with 1, that's great too. All right, so I like to have 2, and then I like to drop them pretty quickly. So I like to change my interval down to like 0.5, drop 2 quick, and the repeat, I like to have that set at around 3. So I'll be dropping 6 flares total, okay, and I'm going to hit the save button. I'm going to drop 2 flares 3 times at half a second each time, okay? So hopefully that will confuse a Sidewinder or IR homing missile. And I would drop this, as we talked about, by pressing the dispenser switch forward button would drop my flares as I'm set on manual program 1. Now, as we talked about, hitting the aft button will drop the flares manual program 1, not the forward. Okay, so when I hit the aft button, it'll drop this, flares. So I know that the aft button is my anti-sidewinder countermeasure. Okay, now I know that hitting the forward dispenser will run manual program 5. So I'm going to go to manual program 5, and I'm going to set this up now. Because I already have a program set up for sidewinders, I like to set my program 5 up for radar guidance missiles. Okay, so I don't need any flares for radar guided. Okay, I'm going to increase my chaff up to 2 chaffs, and I like it to repeat a little more. I like 4 repeats at an interval of 1 second. That's pretty good. Okay, radar guidance is usually going to be longer range, so you have more of a reaction time. You could even get this interval up to like 2 seconds. Okay, that's still pretty good. And basically what this is you would run this program, it would go 2 chaffs, it would repeat 4 times every 2 seconds. It would repeat once every 2 seconds 4 times. Okay, so this allows you, running the ALE program is better than using the bypass, because you can concentrate on your maneuvering and not worry about your countermeasures. You can just press it once and it'll run the program, and you can concentrate on your maneuvering to get rid of that missile, your evasive maneuvers. Okay, so that's how I would set this up. That's how I like my program 5. I like program 5 to be radar guided missiles, and I like program 1 to be my IR homing defense. Okay, now let's say that I was flying to a position where, let's say I was flying 140 kilometers to a target and I was going to drop some bombs on him. Okay, so over that 140 kilometer distance that I'm flying, let's say there's a chance of me being intercepted by an enemy plane. Okay, so I like to have this set up like this, and then once I get to the bombing run, what I want to do is I want to run a different program for my bombing run. So what I like to do is come down here to program 2, and I like to set it up with 0 chaffs, 1 flare, repeating every second. Oh, sorry. Interval every second. Okay, so let's talk about why you would need flares for a bombing run. Okay, so in a typical bombing run, there's obviously going to be enemy SAM sites and things like that. SAM sites are generally going to be using radar guided missiles. There are some that use IR homing, but we're just going to talk about the radar guidance in that sense. Typically, if they're sending you in for a bombing run, a SEAD mission has been executed prior to your arrival. A SEAD mission is a suppression of enemy air defenses. Okay, so other planes before you have come along and they've taken out the enemy SAM sites. So then you're coming in to drop your bombs on whatever your target is. Now, so you say, you know, we have the SEAD mission executed, air defenses have been suppressed, why am I dropping flares as I come in for my bombing run? Okay, the answer for that is because there are things called man pads, okay, which are shoulder-fired rockets, anti-aircraft rockets, missiles, okay? And what these are is an IR homing, kind of like a Sidewinder missile that a soldier would fire off the ground off of his shoulder, okay, kind of like an RPG. And the fact is that a SEAD mission can't take these out, okay? It has no way of taking out one single soldier. You have no idea where the threat is. Maybe he's hiding in a forest, you know, you won't see him. So you're coming in for your bomb run and you don't drop flares as you come down. You're concentrating on your bomb run. You don't have time to be looking around, looking to see if a manpad was fired at you. So you want to be running a flare program, excuse me, you want to be running a flare countermeasure program all the way down to your bombing, and then also as you pull up and break away from the bomb run. You want to be dropping flares the whole time. And the reason for that, again, is because you're concentrating on your bombing run. You don't have time to be looking around for those flares. Sorry, for those a white streak of a missile coming at you. So let's have a look at what happens when you come in for a bomb run without flares. Okay, so you see that guy, he wasn't paying attention. He was coming in for his bombing run with no flares. He didn't know there was a manpad with an IR homing missile right there, and he got shot down. Okay, so what you want to do, like we said, is drop flares all the way in. Now, in order to set this program up correctly, you need to know how long your bombing run is going to take. Okay, I generally have never done a bombing run that took me less than 15 seconds. Okay, so I like to have my repeat set to 15 at an interval of 1 second. What that means is that for 15 seconds, every second I will drop 1 flare as I execute my bombing run. Okay, if you know your bombing run is going to take longer than that, you can increase your repetitions. Get it up to 20, 21. I generally don't like to increase my intervals. I think 2 seconds is a little too long for an IR homing missile coming at you. They're short range, so it means you don't really have a lot of reaction time, so I like to keep it at 1 second. Okay, so as I come in for this run, I'll drop 1 flare for 20 seconds every second. So let's go have a look at what that looks like. So you can see that's a much safer way of coming in for a bombing run, because if there was a guy with a manpad there firing one at you, you would highly increase your chances of that missile tracking a flare instead of tracking you. Okay, so that's the safe way to drop a bomb. Now, let's just talk about how I would set this up as I come in. So you remember how we set the programs 1 and 5 up for flares and chaffs for like a dogfight scenario or a BVR fight, okay? The BVR fight was manual program 1 for radar guided missiles. I would return, I would change the mode to step. I would have it set up manual 1 as I was flying to my target. We said it was 140 kilometers to my target, let's say, and there was a chance of me intercepted by another enemy fighter. So I would have my program set up to manual 1, and as we talked about, it automatically runs manual 5 when I hit the forward position. So I know that I'm covered against an enemy plane for now. Then let's say I get to the target site and I'm ready to begin my bombing run. What I would do is come down here and I would just hit step, and I would change my countermeasure program to program 2, which we had set up as the bombing run countermeasure, right? Remember, program 2, 1 flare for 21 seconds, repeat 21 times for 1 second each, which is 21 seconds of flare drops, right? And because I have it set up like this is my bomb run, I know that I'm good. So I can just quickly change between manual 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm flying to my target, I'm manual 1. Now I'm beginning my bombing run, I go manual 2, and I'm in the bombing run, I can run this. Okay? So this is how you would set these things up. That's a little bit of the theory behind sidewinders and BVRs and IR homings and radar guidance missiles, how you would defend yourself, and then how to set it up for a bombing run. Okay? So I hope you guys found this helpful. If there's anything else you want to see, let me know. We can talk about that too. Alright guys, thanks a lot. Thanks for watching.